so excited. It's been a years long making for the 1.5 show, hashtag 1.5. You can follow us on social media to get the latest, but we do have a website for the show. It's at theseedproject.org/1.5. 1.5 generation is a term to describe those who resettled in new communities as children.
So the 1.5 exhibition was something we initially imagined as sort of a traditional exhibition that you would have gone into a gallery to see. And as a result of COVID, we had to change our plans, and pretty quickly. There is now what I like to describe as an art experience that you can access entirely from public space. So the experience starts at 350 Robert Street, the museum's entrance in downtown St. Paul, and it circles around the building. You can pop into the building, and there's an installation in the Skyway that you should check out if you're cold, if you need a coffee, and then pop back out, and the exhibition continues along 4th Street, running along the Green Line.
The Pakwan itself is supposed to be where there are strings that are tied to this centerpiece. And so the centerpiece has everything from like boiled eggs to flowers, and it's decorated very beautifully. And it's usually with colors that are white, marigold or saffron, yellow type of colors. And so it symbolizes Buddhism as well. The Pakwan, I reimagined it to be about some of the cultural artifacts that we had growing up. I used the Café du Monde cans with flowers. The base was an heirloom by a friend whose mother passed away, and then there's a wooden piece on top that is typically used during Buddhist almsgiving. And so I put together flowers there to signify growth and new possibilities. The strings are draped over it in a way where it is reaching out and touching all the different spaces around it. And so usually the Pakwan has strings that come out from the centerpiece and people are holding on to it. And the more that it gets connected with the strings across different people, that's how the blessings are connected.
It's a project that I've been doing for the past 15 years. And I've been documenting and telling my personal story of our family's diaspora. The show is showcasing artists that are unseen and also underrepresented in museum spaces and also gallery spaces. If we don't have the opportunity to tell our story alongside the American Vietnam War narrative, then our existence will be forgotten. Fence is a mixed media painting on an actual fence that I have found in the garbage. Being in quarantine has had me thinking about like what it is to be home. But these picket fences are barricades to keep people away. I'm just thinking about like who gets to call things home, or who gets to put borders up. And the family that is painted on the fence is the journey. The photo that my aunt is holding is my grandmother, because she had passed away. And my grandpa is the one sitting on the chair. Railroad Park Boy was really that I remembered like growing up with so many refugees in Albany Park. We sort of like stuck together in this group, in this community in Albany Park. In the background, there is like these houses. They're sort of like these broken shaped, triangular, gingerbread looking houses, but they have these X's on them. The buildings with the X's on them are symbolic to buildings in Chicago that marks it as unsafe to live in or unsafe to go into. Railroad Park Boy is this ambiguous boy with like no face, and he's in the dark. He's actually crossing it or coming from or leaving from it. That the other side is sort of like this broken down, unstable place. And that's, for me, the unstable place was Albany Park. Coming in the 80s in Albany Park was like very unstable. a lot of gang violence, and also a lot of racism that we've experienced. After School Special is a triptych of a child making a ramen or instant ramen, and it's basically a photo out of the mama noodle package, the instant noodle package. So when you turn it around, there's the instruction, and there's this little Asian boy making their noodle, right? So the way I thought of it as like my memory of my after schools were making these soups. And my mom and my dad they worked a lot. So, coming home after school wasn't like there's going to be a meal ready or there'll be a snack ready for us when we're hungry, right? So I learned how to make ramen from watching the picture in the Mi Mama package. And what's funny is it's a trial and error because the writing in the Mi Mama package is in Taiwanese. And I don't read Taiwanese. So just looking at the picture and by trial and error, that's how I figured out how to make a ramen without turning on the stove. The Gunnison kids are people that I grew up with, and also my childhood as well. In the picture, there are these kids who are appearing and disappearing. When the 1.5 came to the United States or came to Albany Park, we were experiencing a lot of not just for culture shock for us, but for those who were already here. They were shocked that these different people are here too. The rawness of this neighborhood was this tension between outside and inside world. Night and Colonial Red is basically how our transition into the middle class neighborhood, right? Where there is more predominantly white people. The cutout is a bit more clean and also torn. So I'm playing on both aspects of texture. Flag number 1 is a reassembled collage piece that has a form of an American flag. And the material is made from, or it comes from, the sampang bag, or also known as the refugee bag, also known as the rainbow bag. And it's known to our house as tong mamay, which is like refugee bag or the newcomer's bag. So I thought about a flag that people can recognize right away, but not really. But the shape of it and the color and the 13 stripes and the square that is blue. I'm really interested more of the form of the piece and how raw the stitching is. American as Fuck is my parents in their backyard. I'm reminiscing of the Grant Woods painting, American Gothic. My romantic understanding of the American couple is my parents. A Vietnam War veteran in his army fatigue, and his wife. She is wearing her Lao Sin, and they are intimately standing next to each other. And in the background, there is a homage to Chicago life, where they bought their first bungalow in Chicago in 1993, giving the homage to my childhood and also the backdrop of how I grew up, a sort of full circle for me and also for my family.
I do relate to the 1.5 experience. I came over when I was 4 from Laos, and my work is predominantly, about me, which is normal as an artist, but it speaks about my culture, my heritage, my background. Cluster Debris is a piece that is a lotus egg-shaped piece that is created on 6 different boards, and they're all modular. The purpose of the painting and create this massive work was to really be unapologetic in terms of size, but also the content of the work, and really thinking about the colors that start to symbolize my own Laotian heritage and textile. And that was an homage to my mom, who's a textile artist back in Laos and sold textile. But in a sense that I also wanted to bring the bright, loud color that really speaks about the issue about the secret war in Laos. And so this series is part of that. Aftermath is a linear piece. It's horizontal, and it is 12 feet wide by 8 feet tall. It symbolizes how we as refugee and immigrant have had to create a home, quote unquote, for ourselves in various places and being transported from here to there and trying to establish root. Aftermath is really, after the war. Aftermath really for me speaks about my brothers and sisters and mom's stories about all the turmoil. These big abstract pieces are very jagged or kind of put together in a way that they kind of fit, but they don't kind of fit, because that's kind of how I feel as a 1.5 generation. Scattered bomblets are created by a silicone mold, and then I've sloshed resin on the inside of it, so it's actually a hollow form. The form is an actual bomblet that I've acquired online that's supposed to represent the secret war on Laos, but they're bright and they're colorful and they're plastic. That's supposed to speak volume about the children who have been maimed or killed and still continues to be that way today. And there are over still 80 million bomblets that are on the ground in Laos. So the secret war is something for me, I feel as though I didn't know a ton about, but have realized that even though I lived in the US, why do I care if Laos should be, we should get rid of the bomblets? I think it's almost definitely a humanitarian kind of act in terms of taking on these types of creating work that relates to and advocate for not only change, but for safety for all. Transparent Voices is a piece that is created by printing out all these refugee images that I have acquired from the refugee community online, and then printed them out on really sheer fabric, and then cut them all out individually, sewed them all together by one fine thread, speaking about the strength of the Southeast Asian community. And as it's cascading down, it is held down by sticky rice bags that I've sewn together. And sticky rice is, the staple for Southeast Asian, at least the Laotians. And so it's the thing that binds us all together, and it's about food and culture. Marigolds for us is part of our ceremony, the Baksi ceremony, and it speaks about growth and death, and so in that sense the flower symbolizes so much, and it reminds me definitely of our culture and the beauty of it, and just this kind of intense orange color. It's about home, and so this piece in particular, it's tent-like because I wanted it to kind of be like home, but yet it's kind of like a nomad, so you can kind of pick it up and go like a tent would be. You can relocate it, and I feel like that's what these voices and the refugee photos are about, are these voices. I mean, they're photos with numbers. So at the end of the day, are we just numbers? And I think the strength within the numbers speaks volume.
I make anything from the brevity of sketchbook art, which is really personal to me. If I'm sketching ideas, or if I'm just, bored and looking for inspiration, I start drawing in my sketchbooks. And then sometimes, they turn into bigger things. It's very difficult for me to draw a demarcation point in how much Hmong I am and how much American I am. Because to my parents, especially my mom, I feel like I'm always having to prove to her my Hmongness. Whereas if I were, within a group of coworkers or, anywhere else, even growing up in a very small rural town in North Carolina, I felt like I wasn't American enough. Where do you fit in? And so I think, the importance of the 1.5 exhibit, and also all of the contributing artists, I think the most important thing is telling our stories and what it's like. 'Cause a lot of times you assume people know what it's like, because you live that life. But when you actually talk about it and you tell your stories, people are just amazed by it. Like, whoa, you go through that? Like, yes, I may appear very American on the outside, and I'm Hmong as well, but those two things are not mutually exclusive. I really wanted to just illustrate a bottle of fish sauce. I'm gonna make it fun, and I'm gonna have the literal sardine breaking out of it, as if it's almost breaking down the stigma of fish sauce, because it's always carried a bad name for the smell and the taste for so long. And now, just like kimchi, it's becoming a trend. It's, everyone's using it. I mean, I want to say even 5 years ago, if I were to mention fish sauce, people would cringe and, they'll make disgusted looking faces. But nowadays they'll say, oh yeah, I have a bottle of that in my fridge and I put in everything. So it amazes me how food can become trends. You know, these are common household items and these are the things that we consume, but just putting a little fun twist to it. Each time we would go to the Hmong village, when I go with my mom, usually the vendors would stop her, ask her to take a look at these herbs, and my mom would ask them, what is this one for? And they all look the same. Some sort of form of dried medicine, which is shipped over from Thailand or Laos. And each time my mom would ask, they would ask her first what her ailment was. And then she would tell them and they'd say, well, this is great for that too. And so I would just wonder, like, Mom, do you think it's really meant for that? You know, and she'd say, oh yeah, they mean it. I mean, they know, they're the experts. In the piece itself, it has little tags that would have the original, what it's for, and then it would be crossed out, and then suddenly it's for something else. Even more superficial, things that we want in life in America, all of a sudden, as opposed to your health. It's a little quirky, in a sense, but it does speak to how we've evolved being in America as opposed to what our parents have been through as immigrants.
So a lot of the work that I've done has really delved deeper into my cultural background and into like my identities. So I grew up in like a very white, very suburban area, went to a very white school, and I was basically kind of assimilated. I used art as a way to really explore my background and to really find like the stories that I felt connected to. Essentially, my family isn't very conversational, but as I grew up, my sister and I started asking more questions. They became more open to sharing little bits and pieces of their history, of their story, and of their selves. And so I think this was a way of connecting, essentially. I initially started this as like a 10-piece series of like different forms of grief and different forms of like how the body expresses feelings. This was also my like exploration into like watercolor and inks as well, and seeing how the two interplay. And so I finished all 10, and I chose these 3 specifically because I felt like these were the 3 most compelling and express what I was actually looking for.
I lived in Wisconsin and I moved to the Twin Cities. Since then, I've been really interested in building community and reconnecting with my culture. And then what drew me to design, I think, was just growing up, hearing our Hmong stories and not having them written or recorded down. It just really drew my interest to work with words. And to work with like telling stories. So Motherland is a piece that came out of a conversation I had with my mom and my dad. And it just deals with the themes of home and the concept of home. Home being the place where your family is, and also for them, home being Laos, kind of taken away from them because of the war, right? So the piece depicts the merging of a woman and actual land. And so the woman kind of forms like the mountainscape. My dad always talks about the mountain peaks of his village. So I wanted to create something that was in honor of him and his home and his motherland, but also something that represents my mom too. When they were escaping Laos, she was pregnant. And so the portrait is a picture of a pregnant woman. The womb also creates the sun, and that to me was representative of the new generation and how some of that trauma is carried down to new generations too. I chose to go with embroidery. It was inspired by the story cloth, although it's in a new style, interpreted in my own aesthetics.
The Fermented Feelings installation is very much more of me and my childhood, seeing my mother take empty containers of like Kemp's ice cream buckets or other jars and repurposing it to ferment things And so it's a process that all Southeast Asians or people from the Mekong Delta do. I jarred 2 new ones taken from my mother's and some other aunties and mixed it in, and I have some fragments of memories like photographs and toy soldiers and cassette tapes from the 80s. Southeast Asians in general process their mental health and well-being is they ferment it. They ferment their feelings in the same way that our aunties ferment fish. It's also a statement of my childhood in terms of being so afraid of sharing food that was stinky with my classmates. I'm turning that shame around as art. I think about the war and how the very first public images of it that I've ever seen as a child was Rambo. It's very American, right? And it's also a symbol of saviorism. So it's like, here's Rambo, he's here to save you. A single blue plastic stool. It's also very representative of Southeast Asians in terms of, we didn't have fancy furniture. We just had these plastic stools you had to sit on if it wasn't the floor. The artwork that's on the wall, it was from a Lao community conversation, where we gathered stories from our elders in a community garden. We had artists who had put up canvas and paint for people and elders to contribute to it. And then it started storming. We decided to keep it and include it. Rain signifies purification. It signifies the washing away of old or bad negative energy and into the new. We thought, yeah, this is beautiful. This is one way that we see the connections to healing.
I'm a multimedia artist and I'm a community organizer. So a lot of my work is often based in needs in the community. Khmer I Spy is a photo of sort of a multimedia assemblage, which means just odds and ends, bits and pieces, little things that I found around my parents' home that really, for me, evoked a sense of my childhood, and some objects that also reminded my dad of his childhood. It's a map made out of objects, and maybe for some other people, they look at it and it'll be a random assortment, but when I see it and when my sister sees it, we can identify each item and know, okay, that's on the basement shelf and that's out in the garage, and it holds some sort of emotional charge for us. The Living Fields is a series of photographs of a friend who is a 1.5 generation. The title kind of plays off of the name The Killing Fields, which is a place where Cambodian people suffered tremendous genocide during the Civil War. It's kind of the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people when they think about Cambodia, and wanting to push people to expand beyond that, constant association with trauma. So there's a person sort of standing in the middle of a green space, and they're being held by these hands that emerge from the grass on either side. Yeah, it's just an exploration of what can it mean to feel at home on a land that wasn't your home at first, but is starting to become something that's a comfortable place for you. For the Backwaters series, to create that series, I went back and spent some time in the valley that I grew up in. It's in the Driftless region in southeastern Minnesota. Something that's really special about that area is that the backwaters of the Mississippi actually grow a species of lotus. They have lotus flowers that grow that look like flowers that grow in Southeast Asia. It's somewhere that every summer my dad will paddle out to see if the flowers are blooming yet. I don't think he was expecting that I asked him to get out of the boat and walk around in the mud. That was just a moment in a summer afternoon of being out on the land and in the water, and just kind of connecting to this plant and this setting that is really familiar in a lot of ways.
The installation is about the operation we believed at the end of the war. It was a flight operation that allowed to save children from from Vietnam. I was one of the baby in this flight. More than 3,000 were just flight to America, all around the world to be adopted. One baby on one chair in a box, in a cardboard, and with a blanket, and they sit one in each seat. It was, for me, it was maybe my way to go out from Vietnam, but it was also a way for me to be separated from my country. And you live in this duality all your life. My wife is Lao. Her father was a little bit in danger. He was a doctor, and he realized that it was in danger. So all the family preferred to leave, and they had to cross the river. They had to separate themselves in different groups, and that's the second part of my work. It's a tribute to my white family.
Take me out of here. Let me forget everything. All the pain I leave. All of this change I feel. One more day and I'll die. Please take me out of here. Sing me a song. Sing me words to fade out the world. The gunshots in my head, the screams in my sleep. Please sing me a song. Hold me again. lets me forget everything, all the pain I leave, all of this change I feel. One more day and I'll die. Please take me out of here.
Oui, dans sous l'eau. Ah! Mais oui, j'ai fait ça. Oui, ça marche.